Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my Blacadian universe. I need to talk about the recent UN vote that designated the transatlantic slave trade as the greatest crime against humanity. And this one hit me right in the heart. And I want to talk about it. So let's talk about it. So this is a big deal. If you've looked at my social media feed, I've, reposted everything that I've seen that, I've agreed with about it. And everyone said it so eloquently and beautifully. But one of the things that I want to talk about that I haven't seen yet being talked about yet is, there's been talk about the reparations and, all of those things and what it means. But what it means for me and why it is so impactful for me is because for me, it's a vote towards a fight against the dehumanization of Black people. So one of the greatest atrocities, and one of the reasons why I believe the enslavement of Black people is one of the greatest crimes in humanity is not just because I'm a Black person, of course, it's personal, but because of this dehumanization of our struggles and something that continues to this day. I can tell you, living in 2026 as a Black woman, my humanity is in question. I feel it. I've lived it my whole life. It's not up for debate. And that is why it is the worst. So the point that I want to focus on is that dehumanization and also the argument against the fact that we are being dehumanized. So whenever people talk about slavery, want to talk about slavery or enslavement of people, you know, the most common declaration that will come back is that it was so long ago, get over it. We've all heard some variation of that, that argument that, oh, it's so long ago, just get over it, just get over it, just get over it. And no other group in human history is ever told to forget one of the most impactful crimes against their people than Black Americans are, Black Caribbeans, Black people are just told that we need to forget it. It's in the past. And that, to me, is the greatest crime that still is being carried on right now, is that we are not allowed to mourn. We're not allowed to grieve. We are not even allowed to acknowledge the injustices, the disgusting crimes that were committed against our people. In very recent history, there are color photographs of people, trying to scare a 6-year-old little girl for wanting to go to a school with white people. They're carrying coffins with a little doll in it. That's disgusting and heinous and gross and inhumane. And we're just supposed to sweep that under the rug. We can't talk about it. We can't acknowledge it. People don't want to hear about it. That is what we are faced with when we try to talk about our lived experience, our lives, our history. They try to rip it off of the streets. They try to take it off of buildings. They very nearly tried to extinguish it from history books. And it's always made me angry. It's made me angry that people don't see that suffering as suffering. They want to just ignore it because they don't see our suffering as real and true, because they are still so colonized in their mind that harm being done to Black bodies is not real harm. So when people reacted to, this vote from the UN, people wanted to say, and I think, I don't know, someone in the room said that you cannot rank, the tragedies in human history. You cannot rank them. And in a perfect world, in a world where white supremacy didn't reign supreme, that would make sense. But every single time you say, get over slavery, you're ranking human atrocities. The fact that you sat in that room and said that you can't agree with this vote, knowing the reason that it needed to be voted on, to have some acknowledgement, because it has been tried to be erased from our history. The fact that you could sit there is sitting and seeping in white supremacy. The fact that you do it every single time someone wants to acknowledge the transatlantic slave trade, the harm done to Black people, and say, we cannot rank the atrocities. Every human life is equal. That conversation only comes up when we talk about the enslavement of African people. That's the only time this conversation comes up. I want to hear people say, forget about the Holocaust. It happened so long ago. I want to hear people say, oh, the War of 1812, who cares? Oh, your daddy was a Confederate soldier. Who cares? Who cares? That happened so long ago. Get over it. I don't want to hear about Columbus. I don't want to hear about that. It happened a long time ago. Who cares? Stop talking about it. Get something new to talk about. Bring that same energy to other atrocities that you are trying to attach to the transatlantic slave trade. I want to see weddings held at the Holocaust museums. I want to hear, about weddings being held on top of Flanders fields because it's so beautiful. Does that sound disgusting? Does that sound atrocious? That is what happens when people are having plantation weddings, because you've compartmentalized in your brain that just because the greatest crime against humanity happened at this spot, oh, there's some pretty trees. If you had a wedding at a plantation site, I'm sorry, you're a racist. Sorry, not sorry. That's the reality, because you sat there and said people were imprisoned here, were murdered here, were abused here, friggin' eaten here. And you said, I do not care, because they were Black bodies. That's anti-Black racism. That's why you could have your wedding there and smile about it and put your head down on a pillow and lay there and look at those pictures years later and smile about it. You had your wedding at the site of a disgusting historical field, and you felt okay about it because of anti-Black racism. if you wouldn't do it on the sites of like the gas chambers of the Holocaust, then you shouldn't have done it at a plantation. And the only reason it is okay, that it's made to seem okay, is because it is so normalized to dehumanize Black people. And that is exactly why the UN needed to have this vote and rank it as the greatest crime against humanity, because it is. And nobody is even saying it. We don't even get the dignity of being able to say it. You need to be held accountable. It's disgusting. You need to be held accountable. I want people to be held accountable for doing those horrible things. I want people to um, acknowledge that there is no right there. There is no justification. There is no excuse. Anytime I see that, I was like, we cannot be friends. There are people that I'm not going to say their names, but famous celebrities that have done it. And I was like, ew, they literally disgust me now. Like, I was like, instant grossness. Like, ugh, that kind of reaction I have it, because I was like, if it was any other site of a horrible human tragedy, you wouldn't be erecting a tent and drinking champagne there. But because it happened over Black lives, it's just whoosh, swept away. No excuse, inexcusable. So I will end on this. The talk about reparations. So, uh, for those of you who don't know, you know, other nations, the US, Israel, and Argentina voted against this UN vote. No surprises there, just just consistent, I guess that's the word. The nicest word I can use for that is just consistent. And so my own country, Canada, abstained. And no opinion on this is an opinion. Okay, that's not okay. Like, don't, that it's just smacks of like racism in Canada. It's just like the nice guy way of not taking an opinion is, excuse my language, bullshit. It's an opinion. We know what you think. And, people are saying it's because of reparations. They don't want to be repaid. And I'll tell you this, the debt owed to Black Americans, to anybody that has whose lives have been touched. That includes people in Africa, Africans, Black Canadians, everybody, Black Caribbeans, anyone touched by the transatlantic slave trade. But I'm talking specifically Black people are owed reparations. And the reason why this is such a divisive item, where people are abstaining and not voting and not trying to have an opinion about it, even though that is an opinion, because if you don't condemn it outright, then what are you saying? The debt can't be repaid, and they know it. That's why they don't want to acknowledge it, because they don't want to be seen as owing anybody anything. That's what white supremacy is. They want to be on top. And the second you acknowledge that you owe somebody something, then, and very rightly so, you lose the power. The things that have been taken from Black people, our culture, our labor, our ideas, our inventions, the things that are currently still being taken from Africa. A country that's so poor yet has served so much wealth across all the world. If there was an attempt to try to make reparations for it, it would bankrupt the world as we know it. And that's why it can't be allowed. That's why this dehumanization of us needs to continue, because they don't want to give up their power, and that debt cannot be repaid. And it's one of those things where reparations doesn't always have to be monetary. For me, it should be. Let's be honest. We should be monetarily paid. even if that needs to be over hundreds of years, but repay that debt. It's the right thing to do, let's be honest. But it needs to be that acknowledgement. It needs to be things like this where we are acknowledged to have suffered the gravest crime against humanity. And it needs to be in our actions. It needs to be in holding people account for the way they talk about Black lives, the way they talk about Black people. When someone comes back with all lives matter, they need to be held accountable and be told that that is racist tripe and it has no place in our world. And I speak to it often about when people learn from their history. We talk about, in Germany, and they hold up plaques of where things have happened in the Holocaust, atrocities, and, it's there every day where people are bustling about going to work, going to school, doing their lives. They can see that. They can learn from that. Whereas, other countries, we abstain from votes on it. Canada. And, we try to take down acknowledgement of the enslavement of Black people and the history of the slave trade, America. This is the difference. When I say that those things are reparations, that acknowledgement, so that people can start understanding how anti-Black racism is seeped into everything that they are consuming and seeing and viewing and doing right now in 2026. That's a great place to start for reparations. Thank you so much for listening. As always, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will talk to you next time. Reparations now.